have your curl tangles. No. It's like total mess of nonsense. Okay, we
Yeah.
have to start.
Okay.
But I miss you.
I know. I love
miss
this.
you. Welcome to the virtual compound. In the last episode, we started our book club series with Fourth Wing. And if you're into reading, you should go check it out. Today, we are talking parenting and just giving some life updates since it's been a while. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous Sunday afternoon in Southern California at 3:30 in the afternoon. And it's like 80 degrees
Nice.
almost. Oh, yeah. All of my windows are open.
Nice.
It is 8:30 a.m. in Okinawa, and it is freezing cold. It's 53 degrees and windy
Ooh.
On Monday.
On Monday.
on Monday.
In Maryland, it was a beautiful sunny day at 6:30 on Sunday, and they're not going to believe me, but it really was a nice day. Even and I say this because it was the same temperature as Amelia. Amelia, you are as cold as Maryland right now.
Which is ridiculous. I moved to a tropical island.
Subtropical, not entirely.
Doesn't matter. Still has tropical in it.
It still has tropical.
This is an unacceptable temperature. I would take 60 for like 2 or 3 months, and even like 1 month of it with rain, to wear shorts all year for it to be like hot all year.
I don't know. It gets pretty gross over there. There are times when I would rather put on more layers than get to the point that I'm so hot I can't take layers off anymore, and now I'm just
Yeah, I'm
incredibly
okay with that
uncomfortable.
point
Okay.
because
No,
I live
I
in a
would
world
rather
with
be
AC.
hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather
Because
be
I live in a
hot.
world with AC.
Yeah.
Sam's always like, "What would you have done like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, something like that?" Like, I probably died.
Right.
And I'm completely serious when I say that, like several times over. And also, if not death, then the Lord had me born during this time period because he knew that I literally
For a
could not
reason.
handle it and probably would have just died of like,
Right.
this is hard. So
There are other things I can deal with that are hard.
done.
This is not
Yeah.
the thing.
This is not the thing. Or I can deal with a lot of hard things, but like inclement weather without like the ability to like be out of inclement weather, not
You know
not
what?
it.
You know what's going to happen then when she does finally leave there. She is going to come here, but it's going to be when Wyatt and I leave. And so then she's going to have to deal with it by herself. We tried. We tried to get you here with us so that I could baby you and you could just sit by my fireplace and we could do all this in the same room. And no, you had to go and be stingy and stay there for even longer.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. It's fine. As Lacey mentioned, we're discussing parenting choices and styles. This is going to be one of our regular segments as we move through the year because it encompasses so much. So today, we're kicking it off with the moment we became parents, our birth stories. Some are a little dramatic, but here we are. And just know that we all have wonderful growing children, including a brand new one that is currently laying on Lacey's chest because she's back asleep.
Mhm.
Baby.
Maybe.
Getting snuggles.
Who wants to kick us off?
Oh, I could go. Similar to Katie, traumatic. So I was 43 weeks pregnant, because I had not great providers at the time, and didn't know what I didn't know because it's my first baby.
First babies.
And my water broke, but it was like slow break, like a slow leak. And then, I went into the hospital and they admitted me, and nothing was happening fast enough after like many hours. And, they put me on Pitocin, which is I understand that it's a really good thing and it's like helpful and all the wonderful things, but holy crap, it hurts.
Oh, yeah.
And it hurts going in, and it's like one of those medicines that like you can feel going in and it
Yeah.
hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts. It makes your contractions terrible. Like the horrible, 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 awful bad. And, then pushed for I had to get medicine to like help me dilate more because I wasn't dilating fast enough. It's like that. It's the one that's like made of seaweed, or it's Cytotec or something like that.
Mhm.
Uh, and that helped. And then when it came time to push, I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for many, many, many hours. Um, and then I started bleeding a lot, um, and wound up with like lots of things happened. Wound up with a crash section, um, but they didn't believe me when I said that I wasn't fully numb, like they were poking me,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't believe me. And then they made the first incision, and it was like fire,
Mm-hmm.
um, going across my stomach. If anyone's ever like, you ever burned yourself on accident, and you're like, oh, it doesn't hurt until it's like that, until your brain registers the hurt.
Uh-huh.
It was like immediately the hurt. Um, and then they knocked me out completely because I could feel them cutting into my stomach.
Right.
Um, and I woke up and I wound up, I had pushed so much, and Josh had wrapped the cord around his neck 3 times. So I pushed my placenta off the wall, thus
Mm.
the bleeding. And
Hmm.
Josh wasn't breathing when he came out. And then I had 3 blood transfusions, and they got me stable. And then they obviously got Josh stable because he's here with us. And he was intubated, like fully intubated and all the things for about a week-ish. And then they were able to extubate him, and we got out of the NICU and we went home with a giant
Hey.
baby.
Wait,
He was
when
huge,
you say giant, he was like 8 pounds, wasn't
like 9, yeah.
Yeah,
he?
it
Okay.
was big.
And he was big. And the funniest part of this story is like going into the NICU to see him, and it's like
Two.
tiny baby, tiny baby, Josh. And it was like touching the sides of the
Oh,
isolette
oh man,
in the NICU because
because
he
they're
was
so small,
so big, and these babies are like tiny.
itty bitty.
And I remember like the nurse picked him up, was like, oh, that's what a real one feels like.
And not only a real one, like a bigger size of the
A
real one.
bigger
Like he
size
wasn't
one,
like
like a big
average.
one.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that was Josh. And
Mhm.
then Clara, because of I have a vertical internal
Mm,
incision. He Clara had to be a C-section, but come to find out, I also have a clotting disorder, um, which they only find out and test for like after you have your first baby.
mm,
Because with this particular clotting disorder, it doesn't manifest like really in pregnancy after you have a baby.
I see.
So typically your first pregnancy is okay.
Okay.
Um, but it can lead to like certain complications in your first pregnancy. Moving on. I have a clotting disorder. My scar on the inside is vertical. So Clara had to be a C-section as well, and because of my clotting disorder, she had to come early. Um, and we had to like do a lot of monitoring for her to see like if there were clots forming, and there were. And then she came at 33 weeks, and another C-section, and whatever drugs they give you like before like a normal scheduled C-section are really good because I went in like super super nervous for my because they gave me a spinal,
Mm-hmm.
not an epidural. And they gave me a spinal, and the anesthesiologist was like, "You seem nervous." I was like, "No, no, I'm fine. It's fine. This is great. It's fine. Everything's fine. Yeah, fine." Because we're like, it's totally fine. They're
Which
just,
is
cutting into me and taking a baby out, which is totally fine. That's totally fine. It's super normal. It's fine. She was like, "Say fine one more time." I was like, "Oh, did I say fine a lot?" No, because it is fine. Like, right? Like, it's fine. You've done this before, right? Like, everybody's done this before. There's no one in here that hasn't done this before. I mean, they have. That's fine. And she was like, like, like squeeze something into my IV bag and like,
They're
mm,
just calm you down a little bit faster.
hold on. And by the time they let Sam in, I was like, we should listen to music. Do you guys like Broadway? I love I love music. I love Broadway music. I love music. We should listen to music. And then
Super
Clara
happy
came
Amelia.
out. Yeah, super happy Amelia. And Clara came out, and there was this like whole NICU team there prepared to like take this tiny baby who's so tiny and obviously not breathing and like or not going to have trouble breathing and all the things. And Clara came out and had like perfect APGAR scores, and I was like, I want to do skin to skin after cesarean. And the doctors were like, yeah, yeah, sure. It's totally
Right.
gonna happen with your preemie baby, 100%. And I was like, okay, great, it's gonna happen. Doctor's like, "Mhm, yeah. And the NICU doctor like put her on my chest and was like, I mean, here you go, I guess.
Right? She's fine.
But like did not leave and like followed me into recovery and was like, it's like what are you, basically she's like, I'm waiting for something to happen. I was like, okay.
All right.
Um,
That's positive.
and nothing terrible happened. She just couldn't like really regulate her temperature by herself,
Mm,
which is like common
Normal.
in
Yeah.
yeah.
tiny babies. Um, and her like blood oxygen level was like not like lowish. She just had to have a forced nasal cannula, so not
Mm,
like low, just
right.
ish. And um, they wanted to put her under the warmer, and Sam was like, I think I'll just hold her for a little bit. Let me give it a shot." And like put her on his chest, like under his shirt, like buttoned his shirt back up
Right.
and put a blanket over her.
Hmm.
And that helped her warm up, and she didn't have to go to the NICU or anything.
Nice.
Um, but like in very Clara fashion, she was like, "Don't touch me.
Yeah,
Like, don't do
Hmm.
anything to me."
that sounds
And
about
like
right.
just like looked at everyone anytime they came in to like do any tests, like, "Ew."
Yeah.
Judgy.
Um, and Josh would be like, "Oh, are you touching me? I think I'll stop breathing. This feels hard."
Right.
Like when they
You're
did
my
his hearing
space.
test, and he was like extubated by the time they did his hearing test. They did his hearing test, and he started going like this, like stopping breathing, and the doctors were like, "What's going on?"
I don't know.
It's really dramatic. But yeah, Clara passed like all of her tests, except she had like a Josh had a little heart murmur, and Clara, which is like they told us, and they were like, "Okay, and you're going home today." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 what?"
Right. We need a time to talk about
I
that
feel
one.
like I feel like we should talk about this. Also, you're sending me home with a baby. We're all okay with that.
Right.
Everyone agrees. We're just going home.
Yep.
No adult supervision.
Nope. You are the adult now.
How much
Okay.
did Claire weigh?
She's 4 pounds.
Okay.
Okay.
She was like a little brat.
Drastically different.
How long
Oh,
was
Like
it was
no
like
she?
half.
clothes to fit.
Yeah, she
It
was.
was half. And like the when Sam got to hold her, he was like he literally was like, "That's it? You were huge." It's like,
Oh, thanks, Samuel.
"Thanks." And he goes, "No, I mean it's just like surprising because she's little. Not you were huge, like okay, that sounded really bad." It's like it did.
It
And the
did.
nurse in the room was like, I don't know how you're gonna recover from this.
Somebody said
She's like,
that
I'm
to
just
me
gonna
this
stick around
time.
to see.
Yeah.
Like, but it was half. It's
Yeah.
literally half. No, not half. Like Josh was 9.
Almost half of Josh. Yeah.
Almost half of Josh. And you think like 4 pounds, that doesn't feel like a lot,
Right.
you know?
With babies, it's a
It's a
drastic
whole, yeah.
difference.
It's so much. And with Josh, because he was in the NICU, they had to go and get like newborn diapers because they
Yeah.
didn't really have
You'll
them. They only
need
had like
preemie.
preemie.
Yeah.
And with Clara, in my head, it's like, well, she's like 37 weeks. She's approaching 37 weeks. Surely she'll be like newborn sized,
But no.
right?
Yeah. Because it's not, it doesn't seem like they grow that much more
It
in
doesn't
those
feel
last
like they grow
couple.
that much, and
Yeah.
you don't feel like you get that much bigger
Yeah.
for them to grow. I mean, with Josh, I was massive because I was like way, way, way pregnant.
Well, you're,
Which is why
yeah.
when women are 37 weeks pregnant, they're like, I just am so pregnant. I'm so pregnant. I'm like, are
Yeah.
you?
Are you? Yeah.
Are you though?
No.
Imagine another month and a half of this.
Mm.
But I just feel like you don't get that much bigger for like the So I didn't buy preemie diapers,
Uh,
and I had never seen a preemie diaper before,
they're so
and they're
tiny.
like
Oh, they're smaller than that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
They're
so
so
small.
like narrow.
they're tiny, and I looked at the diaper in her, and I was like, this can't work, and that's what fit her little tiny butt.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and she was great, and she went home, and yeah, I after 2 C-sections, though, I can very, very confidently say that like people that elect to have C-sections, not due to like a health reason or something, just
Mhm.
because they want to, I truly do not understand
Right.
I don't understand it
at
either.
all. Because I have the recovery is atrocious.
Hellacious. Yeah.
It's hellacious. Like, and you know, the like Asian belly binding, how they do that in
Hmm.
Asia here. It's like I was reading after Josh because it was so hard to like laugh or cough or sneeze or talk or like do
Mm-hmm.
anything. And for it's like you don't notice how many things, little tiny things you
Yeah.
do throughout your day that involve your core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like obviously standing up, sitting down, blah, blah, blah. But it's like not that you don't like think about like this involves my core muscles. It's like this is my leg muscles and my butt.
Right.
Hmm.
And everything was harder with a C-section. And then between Josh and Clara, I had read it because I knew I would have another one about the belly binding thing. And it's like it's like 4 C-sections. I didn't do Asian belly binding. People are like, that's terrible. Um, but it's like this wrap for C-sections, and that really, really helped. Like, because it feels like you have to like hold
Yeah, you feel like you have to hold
your
yourself up.
stomach in, and they
Yeah.
even tell you like when you cough or sneeze to have like a pillow so you can like hold.
Hmm.
Um, and getting the second time I had staples, not stitches, and like getting the staples out,
Mm.
it was better than the stitches, but it doesn't it like it's
It's weird.
feels weirder.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, that was terrible. Yeah. So all in all, I do not feel like an earth mother when I am pregnant. It's not like I feel like I'm glowing in life and all the things. I feel gross. Um, and I think it was exacerbated by the fact that I was like 95 pounds when I got pregnant with Josh.
Oh, dang.
So
And then you
little
ended up with a
tiny baby.
giant
And I ended up
baby.
with a giant baby. So I did not feel comfortable at all that whole time. And then Clara, you're chasing a newborn, so you don't, or not a newborn, you're chasing a toddler. So you don't really like notice, I guess, a little. But also, I was like, I don't feel good. I feel very, very uncomfortable.
Right?
I don't love this. I feel hot all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and then having 2 C-sections, it's like, I don't really want to
I'm
do
done.
this
Yeah.
anymore. Um, and that's kind of why we only have an air and a spare. And also, like, because I have a clotting disorder, the clotting disorder I have, every baby has to come earlier than the previous.
Hmm.
Oh.
Because with every pregnancy, you develop more clots and more
Yeah.
clots and more clots. So, I would, if I were to have another baby, it'd be earlier than Clara at like 33, almost 34 weeks. So it'd be like
Jeez.
sometime between 30 and
Super.
33 weeks and like earlier and earlier. And it's just like,
No, that's so much
we
risk.
like, yeah, we got away by like the skin of our teeth with Clara being
As late as she
okay
was.
and only having to have a forced ear nasal cannula. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. So, and I think that's Clara's personality
Yeah, it's
also.
entirely
Yeah,
her personality.
absolutely.
Yeah. I ended up with one of each, both being rather dramatic. Not intentionally on either case. Zoe, I had planned to get in there, early enough and hoped for the epidural and all of that stuff, and woke up that morning and it was what time I wake up? Like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I just knew. I was like, we're gonna have a baby today. I was like, all right. So it happened to be on a weekend, which was really great. Wyatt was already home because we were prepping. He was supposed to be in TBS, and when we got there, and I was so pregnant, then they put him in the holding company until I had the baby, and then he would actually start TBS after that. And so my mom had come a couple days before. I was 3 days late, not all that far, but I had made it all the way through. And contractions start, and we're going, and we go out to eat, and I'm like keeping a contraction tracker on my phone. And we get back home after lunch and it starts to pick up. I call the hospital. My doctor would they were then supposed to call my doctor because it was the weekend. And I didn't have her number. And so she was supposed to be called and come in to deliver me. We had like had this discussion beforehand. And so I called and they're like, okay, yeah, you're close enough. Come on in. We drive down there. And by the time we get there, that road that we had to drive down Route 1, in Virginia. And for anybody who's listening to this, Route 1 between Stafford and Fredericksburg in early 2010s was awful. Potholes everywhere, stoplights, traffic is bad. Like, I needed to get down there. So every time you're hitting a pothole, there's another contraction. There's another contraction. Like, it was so uncomfortable, and I was doing fine. And we pull into the roundabout at the front of the building at 4 o'clock. I remember looking at the clock in the dashboard before I got out of the truck. 4 o'clock. My mom parks, runs over. Wyatt throws her the keys, and we go inside. So I walk into the building at like 4 o'clock, 4:01, and we get upstairs. And the lady's like, okay, let's get you going. For whatever reason, she decided she needed to strip my membranes right there. And everything sped up really fast after that. And then I ended up with a different doctor. I was like, well, maybe it was a holiday weekend. Maybe mine was off on vacation somewhere. But partway through this, then I'd only been in there for a few minutes, really, I felt like. And the doctor's like, she needs to start pushing. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't really feel the need yet, but okay, you're the doctor. Like, we'll do this. And we're going for a little bit. And she decides that I need that oh so uncomfortable incision and then starts assisting to try to go. And that was so painful that I was not apparently being as productive as I needed to be. And then she was like C-section happy and was trying to like take me to a C-section almost every single time that I had to push. And the nurses are just like, can we maybe try doing some of these other things, like flip her over, do a couple other things? Managed to avoid that, but then the doctor decides I need a vacuum. And if you have ever had a vacuum, they just suction the vacuum to the top of the little baby's head, and then while you're pushing, then they are pulling at the same time.
Yeah.
And if they have a rule, 3 pop-offs, and you have a C-section, that means that suction can come off of your baby's head. It sounds almost like a gunshot, people. Like, it was terrifying the first time that it did it. I didn't have a clue what was happening. And I end up with 3 pop-offs, and I look at Wyatt, like I just opened my eyes. I'm like, there's no way I'm making it to the C-section. Like, she's close enough to need a vacuum at this point. And they're all like looking up and talking to each other. And then I felt the urge, and I just started pushing 2 pushes, and she's out.
Oh my gosh.
Two pushes, and she's out. And then this is where the rest of the drama tries to come. So first off, she tried to come out ear first. I don't know what Zoe was thinking, why she thought her ear needed to see the light of day first, but apparently she did. So they got her fixed before that happened. But then afterwards, because of the vacuum and the speeding up, so I walked in at 4, she was born at 5:30 on the dot. So I went from a 5 to a forced 10 and a baby in an hour and a half. And that's fast, people. That's fast. I then ended up having to be taken. They had only managed to get in my IV, but hadn't been able to use anything because everything progressed so quickly. But in that, I either had so much pressure that I shot it out of my hand, or I managed to catch it and like rip it out of my hand. So I no longer had a working IV. So they couldn't give me any medicine to, clean me up and finish with all of the repairs afterwards, and decided that, and I could feel everything. So decided that I just needed to go to the OR. Like 30 minutes, she'll be done. So Wyatt and Zoe leave, and he goes with her to stay with her, get her all cleaned up, all of that stuff. And I last see him at 6 o'clock. I open my eyes, and there is a clock on the wall, a digital clock, and the very first thing I remember is seeing that clock and counting backwards and realizing that clock says 2100. And my very first thought was, Wyatt has got to be freaking out, because it had been 3 hours since I had gone back for what was supposed to be a 30-minute procedure. And they had had a shift in personnel. And no one was apparently aware, because for whatever reason, they'd had to take me to a different level to do my operation because they were full on the maternity level. So I wasn't even where I was supposed to be. And then the next day, the doctor comes in and basically tells me that it was all my fault, and that we will just have to wait and see whether or not I'll be able to have children, because she stopped counting after 130 stitches. And interestingly enough, one of our XO's wives, who's a doula, she was the one weeks later that told me that doctor ended up being put on probation after Zoe was born. So and that was without, like, from everybody else. Like, my nurses, I had NICU was in there. There was nothing wrong with Zoe, but she had called in NICU. NICU came to see me the next day. Every nurse who had been around came to see me. Like, I am skimming over quite a bit here, but they all came in to just, like, meet me. I'm like, wanted to say hi because of the stuff that they had heard about. I was like, what else was happening when I'm like just trying to have a baby, like ignoring everybody else around? And yeah,
Yeah.
that one was a little crazy. And then everything was fine. I didn't end up having any problems, but there were some interesting things that came out of that on their side. Come to find out, then I get a phone call the next Tuesday from my doctor's office. It's like, hey, you missed your appointment today. What do you mean I missed my appointment today? Well, you didn't come for like your pregnancy appointment because I have a baby. They never called my doctor to even tell her afterwards that I had had the baby, let alone that I was in labor. Neither, nothing. So me thinking that she was on vacation, which is totally fine. I understand
Yeah.
that. Everybody is allowed to take vacation. But no, they just didn't call her, even though that was like specifically meant to call her, and all of this could have been avoided. All of
Was
it.
this civilian or military?
This was civilian.
Okay. Wow.
Yep. Yep. So I wish that the nurses were the ones on that delivery paperwork and not the doctor, because my nurses were amazing. But,
Hmm.
and then Lexi, thankfully, I did go in, make sure everything was fine, no scar tissue. I didn't have any problems with Lexi. And actually, her delivery would have been fine. I had to have an extra not C-section. I had to have an extra, so I had not, part of the problem with Zoe is that I had not mentally prepared myself to do an entirely drugless and unassisted delivery. And like, I didn't have enough time either to like come to grips with that, even in the heat of the
Hmm.
moment. So, like, I didn't even get a painkiller. Like, absolutely nothing was in my system, which women do all the time. And I did it and had to basically just tell myself that women do this all the time. You don't have a
Hmm.
choice. But I just didn't have that chance to like come to grips with it. So with Lexi, I was like, I want to make sure I have enough time to get the epidural and make sure that we're like set. I also was strep B positive with Lexi, and I wanted to make sure I was there early enough to get the meds so we didn't have any delays in coming home. Because if they end up positive, you have to stay at the hospital longer, and it's this whole like thing. So Lexi's actual labor was weird because it would get within the 5 minute mark, and then I'd have a 30 to 45 minutes of no contractions at all. And that lasted for a long time. And the doctor who was on call, again, this was weekend. This was actually Super Bowl. This is Super Bowl Sunday. And the doctor kept telling me, you're not having real labor. I'm pretty sure I know when I'm having real labor. Fine. So we tried to go into the hospital twice, and they called us both times and told us to go home. So the next morning I woke up and I woke Wyatt up. I was like, we're going in to the hospital. We're not even going to call them. We're just going to show up. So we did. That they hadn't had a shift change yet. That same doctor was still there. And as she's checking me, she says, "We would have been better set up if you had called us beforehand, but you didn't. So we're a little bit unorganized right now." And then in the next breath goes, "Oh, you are in labor. You're dilated to a 6. You think? Do you think that I am? Okay, that's great. But I have more water than usual." And so then there's a shift change. My um, labor stalls, and because of the water, it's too much. But my water wasn't breaking, so they were going to break my water. And unfortunately, with that, there wasn't a slow leak like Amelia. This actually would have helped me if I could have had like a slow leak situation, um, but there wasn't, and so it flushed the umbilical cord
Oh
first.
my.
Yes. And I thank the Lord every day that there was a shift change and I had a new doctor for this situation, because she did it and it flushed and she said, okay, we have a prolapsed cord, and her hand is there and she puts her knees on the end of my bed and just sits there and waits, and they start undoing things. And Wyatt, unfortunately, because it's like he's asleep on the couch and we thought this was just like a routine check, so he wasn't really awake yet, and they start trying, the guy had like wrapped my IV around the bed and it's almost getting ripped out. I'm like, stop, 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 stop. Oh, and in the middle of this, I'm only half numb. I'm only numb on the left
Hmm.
side, and they had just flushed my system like 10 minutes before this, but I couldn't stay on the other side to try to get the medicine over there.
Yeah.
And so I'm only numb on the left. I feel everything on the right. She gets up on there and they start wheeling me away. And as I'm leaving, I'm like, somebody please tell him what's going on. So he gets up and they get me in the OR. And somehow in the middle of this, the doctor is replaced by a nurse. So I still have somebody holding Lexi's head up, saving both of our lives right now, because this is a very serious situation if you don't know what a prolapsed umbilical cord is. If there is a compression there, you could lose mom and baby from
Hmm.
lack of circulation. and we switched them out. And thankfully, my IV is still working, but they have to start cutting immediately because we have no time. It's like a 5 minute span of time. And they make the cut, and I do the best I could. I'm in the same lane with Amelia. I felt from middle of my belly button, everything on the right. I felt every bit of it. And the guy's like, "Oh, do you feel that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he just starts pumping my IV like full of whatever medication he'd like get in to help. So by the time they got to the stitching up part, I was numb finally.
Hmm.
But I felt all of the rest of that. I was like, I don't care at this point. She needs to be like safe and out. And they get her out, and the very first thing they said is, "Oh, here she is. It's a girl. She's small. She's really small." This was the day before her due date, and she was 5 pounds 5 ounces. No idea what
Wow.
exactly happened, but we did find out that something had happened. There's a name, and I have just blanked out on it. Um, the umbilical cord was only like partially attached to the placenta.
Oh my.
And so I actually, like, somewhere in there, this happens in the third trimester, and
Hmm.
that's where it had stalled in her growth. And that's when Wyatt walks in. So the poor guy wasn't even in there. He didn't even make it in there for the actual birth, but he did get in there with her. And she, much like with Clara, they're very like similar to this. She was not preemie, but she was preemie size, so they had to put her through all of the preemie tests, and she passed every single one of them.
Hmm.
And my children just needed dramatic ways to enter the world, and then they were fine apparently after that. So, but with that, we both were at that point like, okay, this, I feel like this was telling us you need to be
Yeah.
done having children. Like, I will raise children. If I am called to adopt or whatever, raise another child, happily, I'll do it, but I am not having any more children.
Yeah.
This was a little too close call. So,
Did you have any issues with like bleeding because having like the extra water, like the hydroplate or hydro whatever it is,
yeah.
um, they say that that can cause bleeding for mom. Did you
So,
have any issues with that?
I didn't have any in recovery. As to whether or not I was having any right then, I can't guarantee like everything that they were talking about. I feel like
Yeah.
my closing up was fairly
But you didn't have like a
regular.
transfusion or
I
anything.
didn't have to,
That's
no,
good.
but I had a lot of, so to go with Amelia's, the recovery after a C-section is painful because everything you
Hmm.
do involves your stomach. And I had some not great effects from the medication, and I um, would like dry heave while holding her and be like, "You have to take her away. Like, this is incredibly painful, and I'm not feeling well. Please, like,
Yeah.
somebody come and get her." Like, I was dry heaving on the operating table, like while I'm still strapped
Ooh.
down, and they're like,
Yeah.
I am open, and they're like doing the layers. Sorry, everybody. Um, and I was dry heaving then, which is not uncommon because they keep the little dish next to you
Yeah.
just in case. But it is incredibly painful, especially if you, like me, I wasn't numb. So
Hmm.
later, the dry heaving was painful because I was, that one's kind of expected, but I was already feeling everything. So it was painful from the beginning. But then my brother made me laugh when he came into the hospital, and I don't even remember what the joke was, but I was actually standing, I was like moving around, and I had to lean on the bed, and I was like almost crying because it hurt, but then I kept laughing because it hurt, and it was this vicious cycle of like I can't stop laughing, but I'm in so much pain, and everybody else is laughing. I'm like, this is so miserable, but it's also really funny, but it hurts so bad. And I remember I didn't have stitches or staples. I was glued, and
Mm.
the glue meant I didn't have to go back and have anything removed. But that meant that I had to wait until all of the skin cells died and fell off. So it caught on everything. Like
Yeah.
my pants, I would have to go through with fingernail clippers as like parts of it came up and like clip off the edges of it because it's super glue. Like I couldn't,
Hmm.
you also couldn't see if it was healed because it's just whatever it looked like underneath was literally glued in place. And so if it would try to like move around, yeah, that was uncomfortable. I didn't mind it. My scar isn't awful. Um, but I hate the shelf, as I call it,
Yeah.
like that comes from a C-section because there was the difference between natural with Zoe, everything kind of moves in, but once you have that C-section scar, you now have what's a shelf, and that's everything just kind of sits there. And
Yeah.
I hate that more than anything else. So, Lacey,
Yeah.
what about
That
you?
was four very dramatic.
Yeah.
Mine are super not dramatic. This
That's
is
why you
what
have more
God called
children
me
than
to
we
do.
have.
That's why I have so many. God called me to do this at a very young age. I knew I wanted to be a mom, and I was kind of super obsessed with baby everything, babysitting, watching a baby story on TLC back when they had more
Oh, I
like
forgot about
educational
that.
stuff. Oh yeah, I was obsessed, all of it. Um, and then when my sister had her two kids, I was like very much involved and like, so I was ready. I still read the books and stuff, but with our first, I had to be induced because we were PCSing a week after she was due. So, wait, 2 weeks after she was due? Yeah. So we waited a week and she still didn't come. So she was induced and it was a week old when we PCS. And the Pitocin, like I thought like, well, maybe I'll do it naturally, but I wasn't like mentally tough enough at that point. Um, and
I
so
wouldn't recommend that for anybody unless you are mentally prepared. I'll tell you that. You certainly don't want it in
yeah,
the last minute.
I definitely wasn't. So I was like, yeah, I'll get the epidural. And of course with Pitocin, like needed the epidural. And I was in labor with her for like 17 hours.
Oof.
Um, and then when she was born, it was a little dramatic. It was middle of the night, and they're like, "You're gonna push," and Jeremy was like asleep on the floor because this is the old, like 50-plus-year-old hospital on Camp Pendleton birthing room. They don't have a couch,
Right.
and Jeremy was tired, so he like had like crashed on the floor for a little bit to get some sleep, and like there were so many people in that room because they were teaching new
Oh,
people, so I'm pretty sure my shy and, innocent self had 17 different people just like kind of watching and learning. And hi, yeah, come here. And that one was kind of crazy. So I was like, honey, it's time to push. She's like, what, seriously? I was like, yeah.
yeah. Here we go.
And then when she came out, they were like, oh, I think I see some meconium. So they were like, I didn't even get a hold of her. They rushed her off to the NICU, and Jeremy went with her, and going in there and having like little like arm on a board to keep the needles in and everything was so sad. And
Hmm.
she was perfectly fine. But she's my least touchy kid. And so I think that's why
Right.
she like didn't get that, golden hour. But she latched on right away and was like perfectly easy. It was great. Recovery was really great. I bounced right back. Everything was good. And then we were trying to get pregnant for a while. Not a while. I mean, it felt like a while with our second, and it wasn't happening. And he was getting ready to deploy. So we're like, we'll just wait until you get back. So you'll be here when the baby's born. And we got pregnant with Brody, our only boy. And so Jeremy deployed to Iraq, and I had Brody by myself in a civilian hospital this time.
Hmm.
And a midwife delivered him, and it was such a great experience and I had an epidural with him. But I was like, okay, like sucked he wasn't there. I had to figure it all out with a boy
Right.
by myself because I was only ever around girls. Um, so uneventful and easy day. And then we were in Virginia, so another military hospital. And I ate like a trash panda and I had to do the 3 hour glucose test.
Oh, goodness.
Um, well, the glucose tests always really bothered me and made me feel sick. I'm kind of
Um,
sensitive to sugar. So by the time I had to have the 3 hour one, it was just awful. And like I said, I ate like a trash panda, which makes sense that she eats like Buddy the Elf now. Um, thus Abby was born. That was a really easy labor. I woke up at like 9 a.m. that day with contractions. And then by like 4 or 5 p.m., we went to the hospital. We had a babysitter for the oldest too. And we went down to Fort Belvoir, another really super old hospital, but a
yes.
midwife delivered her. She broke her clavicle on the way out, and
Hmm.
she was 9 pounds, 10 ounces. She was huge and long, and just, she had a golden hour with me, and then Jeremy stole her, and she's had him wrapped around her pinky ever since. Um, and then, everything was great. We got pregnant again, went to Okinawa. And we had to be there before I was like 36 weeks, I think.
Okay.
It might have been earlier than that, actually, now that I think about it, because we had to be there by February 8th and I was due like May 1st. So
Hmm. Yeah.
something. Anyway, um, And this time we were much healthier. We had found fitness and nutrition when Abby was 6 months old. So by this pregnancy, like I was really good. I was really small compared as well. And I had this, I don't think she was an RN. She was maybe a corpsman, or I don't know what she was. She wasn't a doctor that would see me regularly because we were up at Courtney. So we were at the little like medical outpost there for
Yeah.
yeah. And she's like, I can't check to see how far you're dilated when I was 40 weeks pregnant. My hands are too small. And I was like, wouldn't that make it easier?
Right.
Serious? Okay. And so Jeremy always joked he was going to give her the bill to clean the car, because that morning I woke up to kitchen timer, like a turkey's done kind of thing. Went to the beach, and then I came home and took a nap, and he was like, ooh, Jeremy was like, she doesn't nap normally. Something's going on.
Right.
And I woke up to a contraction, and they progressed like in an hour. I had another one, and then they progressed to like a half an hour and 15 minutes. But we put the kids to bed. We both went to bed, and I would wake up, and Jeremy would hear me like wake up and have a contraction and fall right back asleep. So finally it was like 11. I woke up and was like, I can't do this. So I went, sat in the tub, and I called the hospital, which was the old Okinawa hospital,
So down on Lester.
on Lester. And we were up north of McT
Ooh.
a little bit. But it was middle of the night. And I was like, hey, this is my fourth baby. I'm this many weeks. That my contractions are, about 5 minutes apart. And they're like, yeah, come in. And I was like, okay. Like, my shortest labor is like 13 hours, but we'll be fine. Because Brody, I was in labor like for 4 days.
Right.
Which was really kind of exhausting. But it was my second one, and so I hadn't gone into labor naturally at that point yet. So with my fourth one, they're like, yeah, come in. I'm like, okay. So I go and I wake up Jeremy and the kids, and I have everything ready to go. And I'm just laboring, and the kids are trying to talk. And he's like, I'm not being nice in the car, because, those roads in Okinawa are a little bit bumpy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's like, mommy loves you. She's just in a lot of pain right now. Let's be quiet. But they're like, oh, it's midnight. Let's chitter chatter and like talk. We're going to see our friends, and she's having a baby, and this is the greatest thing ever. And I have school tomorrow and all the things. And so we get them there, and Jeremy gets the kids into the house of our friend, and then starts having a conversation, like
Oh
a little
my
chit chat
gosh.
session at 12:30 in the morning, maybe 12:45, and they're on they're on McT, and I'm like,
Oh, you
honey,
haven't even gone anywhere yet.
no, and I'm like, honey, and he doesn't hear me, and so like the window's open, and so I just let out this like the moan, like
Oh, yeah.
the moan, like when you're in labor, like that guttural, and he's like, oop, gotta go, and he like ran to the car. He's like, sorry, and then we try to leave, but because it's almost 1 a.m., the gate guards have their full on rifles, and they're like, you can't leave,
Oh my
and
gosh.
we're like, and I let out another one, and they're like, oh, and he's like, yeah, she's in labor, and they're like, yeah, you can go, because he can't pull out his Liberty card or his like all the things. I think he was like pulling out his ID or something, and because he was like a high enough rank that it didn't work, it didn't
Right.
count, or I don't remember. And so he goes and he's driving. He's like, "You're doing great." And thankfully, I wore a skirt to get in, like to go down to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I don't. It was such a comfortable outfit that I wore a skirt, and I was like, she's coming. And I wrote a blog about this because I had a blog at the time. And I was like, it felt like I was squatting 300 pounds, like
Oh
my
my
hips
gosh.
spreading. I could feel the hips spreading. And he's like, you're doing great. I'm like, no, she's coming. And he's like, you're doing great. I'm like, no, check. So he like apparently went to like reach over to feel to see if he could feel ahead. And I said, no, look, but he's driving in Okinawa, and we've only been there a few months, but he's good at being, on the other side of the road. I remember it very like chaotic, but apparently we were both very calm, according to him. He was like, no, you were like really calm. And I just felt like it was super loud. And so he reaches over and he like feels her head, and he's like, oh. So he like speeds up a little bit. He gets on the expressway and gets the ticket, and he's like flying, which is really, really bad in
Right. In
Okinawa. But it
Okinawa.
was middle of the night. Nobody was there. And it was like overlooking Kadena between exits 4 and 5 on the expressway, that she just came out in the bag of water. She
Oh my
just like, and I
gosh.
delivered her and I caught her
In the
and
water still.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
And I had to have the bag snagged for my first three. So I would have, they probably all would have been born that way. Um, he had been joking the entire pregnancy he was going to get a head mount for our GoPro camera. And I was like, you don't need it. That's ridiculous. Like, we'll just put it behind my head. You don't need to like show everybody. Like, we don't need a video of the whole everything you see.
Right.
Turns out we should have because we have no videos of Charlotte's birth.
Aw.
And she was the smallest one at like 6 something. And I ripped the bag open with my hands and just like suctioned her nose with my mouth and like tried to get her to scream and put her in my shirt. And he was like, "Do you want me to pull over? What do you want me to do?" I was like, "No, she's fine. I've got her. I'm gonna get her to try and nurse." And so like we're still connected, just umbilical cord's still there. I don't have any blankets or anything in the front seat, of course, because
Right.
why would I think about delivering a child in the car? Like my labors will take forever. No, not forever. It was 1:19 a.m. because I had enough like
Wherewithal to
mind
look.
to look at it. Yeah. And I had this vision of our friend who's a firefighter and EMT sitting in the back seat, like
Check
the
talking to
time.
you.
Like I guess, like I don't know. I just remember thinking like that would have been handy or whatever. So then by the time we get to the exit to get off the expressway, he like throws like 1,000 yen in the ticket at the toll booth guy, and he's yelling in Japanese at Jeremy to like stop, let me give you your change. And Jeremy's like, I gotta go, and
Right.
just like flies, like no care or concern for this poor guy. So he got a tip that day, and then he's honking his horn and flashing his lights all the way
Well, yeah, because
from exit 4 to Leicester.
it's not right by an exit. Like,
No, and that's such a no-no. But he was like, he was just in and out of what little traffic there was. It was the godsend that was the middle of the night
right.
because you can't honk your horn and the flashing lights. It's so rude. So then we get there and he like pulls around to the ER. No, he pulls around to the front and like runs in, and he's like, "Hey, my wife is just gave birth in the car," and they're like, "Go around to the ER." He's like, "Okay." So he gets back in and then we go around to the ER and he goes and he gets them and they come out. And they do bring a blanket to give to me to wrap around me and the baby because he's informed them of what's happened. And so I lay it over her and me, and they're like, "Okay, how do we get her out?" And I was like, "It's okay, I'll get out." And like I step up and I like get out, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa!" And somebody comes running up with the wheelchair to wheel me in, and that was they had no idea how to handle it. And it was so funny. It's happened there before, and it happens with typhoons. They'll send
Right.
like
Yes, it has, and with someone that you know.
Ooh.
yeah. And so they'll like send trucks and things. But anyway, so that one was dramatic. And then our next Oki baby was a 10-year gap because somebody was a quitter and then realized I was right. I was right. We needed more children. We got pregnant with our true Oki baby born or
Pregnant
created and born.
right.
Yes. In Okinawa. And that was dramatic because they're like, "You're old." And
this is the end of COVID.
It's the end of COVID era, which we're still wearing masks on everywhere in medical facilities there. I had eaten like a trash panda trying to get pregnant with twins before I got pregnant with her. Did not work, which is good because I couldn't have handled 2 of her. She's still super sassy. So I was not in the greatest shape of my life, and I was old, and I was over 35, and the labor or the OBGYN was on the 3rd floor, all care on base. And so I run up trying not to be late to my appointment, and I had some high blood pressure one day, like 25 weeks in or something. So they marked that in my chart. And then I should also mention here that I had a birth plan to like have as natural of birth as possible in the hospital. Cause like my husband is like you two, very bad things can happen during labor. It's good to be in a hospital.
Right.
So that's why I didn't have home births. If it would have been up to me, I would have done home births with all of them. But he's more cautious than I am. So I indulge, and I just really wanted like a natural labor, left alone.
Right.
Just let dad catch, just let us be here if there's something wrong. So I had told the doctor this, and she was like, "Okay, well, we'll talk about it." And then, so I go in for my 39-week appointment, and it is the second time I run up the stairs because I'm late. and I have high blood pressure. And because I've had two high blood pressures now, they want to take me in for a non-stress test. They want to do like induction and discuss this. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. And while I'm sitting there waiting for my heart rate to come down and just like relax so they can take it again, I see my medical jacket is open and there's a little post-it on there and it says, this one wants an at-home style birth, but in the hospital, this one's going to be a problem with a sad face.
Oh.
And that like spiked my fury. And I took a picture and I sent it to my husband. I was like, this is in my medical jacket. Like, I know exactly which doctor wrote this. Oh, I lost my mind. So then my heart rate didn't go down. And they're like, you need to go in for a non-stress test. So they send me into a non-stress test. And he's like on his way down from Hanson, which is a good 30-minute drive. And I'm just like not relaxing. And they're pushing for induction. They're pushing for induction. Keep in mind, this is just before 4th of July. And I was not happy. And
Right.
they're like, well, sign these things that say if anything happens to you, we're not liable because you could die if you go home. And they're playing the mom guilt card and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, can I work out? And they're like, yeah, you can work out. And Jeremy's like, that's how I know that doctor is full of crap. Like, I don't trust what he says. So we did go in for induction because the mom guilt was heavy. And then that was just like the Pitocin. I tried to do a natural labor with Pitocin. And because it was my fifth baby, the contractions were harder, but also putting Pitocin on top of that made it all the worse. And I couldn't get ahead of the pain. So I kind of had a little bit of PTSD and some trauma going into the sixth labor with Pitocin because they were talking about inducing. And, once you're over 40, they don't let you go over 40 weeks. They want to induce. And so they let me go 3 days over. They let me go past my due date, but I had to agree to a non-stress test twice that week. And the whole pregnancy was phenomenal. I never had high blood pressure. They were a little bit worried about the fluid one day, but she was perfect the following appointment. And like everything went really well. So they were like, nope, you'll be good. Everything's great. Yes, we'll let you go. And then I went into labor the day before my scheduled induction with her. And it was an entire day of laboring. It was pretty miserable by the time. And they were gonna tell me they were gonna send me back home. They were like, you're not dilated. I had been having prodromal labor for 6 to 7 weeks. Like it was forever. And I was like, I don't want to go home. These contractions are really intense. And I happened to have 2 really intense contractions that they're like, okay, we're going to admit you. And Emma was going to be in the room, our oldest, when we gave birth. But we're like, oh, I'm dilated to like a 2. Go home. We'll call you in the morning. Like, don't worry about it. And then I decided they were going to give me Pitocin. I decided to get the epidural. And so they gave me the epidural. And then that allowed me to relax and calm down. And I immediately went to a 10. So it was very, very fast that by the time we found out that we were going to be pushing, it was like 30 minutes. So it was like 11 o'clock by the time they got me fully admitted. And then I had her at 4 o'clock or 3:30. And so it was just like a very fast, like, nope, we're doing this. And then my water didn't break until I started pushing. And it was the first push. My water broke, and then she came out on like the second or third push. I don't even remember. It was very much a blur. And then I immediately felt phenomenal the next day. And I bounced right back, and I haven't had any pain or any discomfort. And so I was like, maybe I could keep doing this.
Nah.
Maybe I could have more children.
I mean, you could, but
this is great. And the hospital was freaking phenomenal. It was a civilian hospital, and it was by far the greatest experience. I've had my doctor who was on vacation called me the morning that I had her later in the morning and was like, hey, I was tracking you. I'm on vacation. I saw that you checked in. I'm glad everything went well. I was like, holy crap. And then a week later, I got a card from all the nurses. Like they signed out, like they wrote all of my other kids' names out and everything. And I was like, oh, I want to give birth here again. You guys are nice. So yeah, I definitely preferred that one.
You got all the good that Amelia and I didn't get. So I'm happy for that because you went through a whole lot more.
Clara, it was like I can relate to like the bougie, like really, really nice hospital because we had Clara in a private hospital.
Nice.
And in El Paso, and it was like people are like, oh, ew, in El Paso. But a lot of like Hispanic Mexican people in like Mexico, that's why I'm saying Mexican.
Right.
People from Mexico come and cross the border. And they're the people that have like a lot of money. And they come and cross the border to have their kids. And like regardless how you feel about that, it meant that I had Clara in like a super bougie hospital. And I remember touring it and being like, TRICARE would never pay for this. Like,
Right.
I'm almost 100% sure they are not going to take our insurance. And I'm gonna have like seen how the other side lives
Right.
and want it and not be able to have it, you know. Um, and they took TRICARE, but it was like real bougie. Like
Yeah.
the baby never left your room once you had the baby, and all
Mhm.
the testing was done in there. And like Sam's bed that he got, because like it was all private suites, and Sam got like not like the couch that turns into a bed. He had
Hmm.
a
A
bed,
bed.
and not a
Yeah.
hospital bed,
Nice.
a bed.
Yeah.
It's like a little twin, like little small skinny bed, but still a bed. And like they had different pillows you could pick from.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Like, do you want a moisturizer?
Super
They had
bougie.
a pillow menu
Oh, wow.
Nice.
I
and like
mean,
a room scent menu
oh.
to like what scents you wanted in your room. And like it was bougie. It was real
Yeah.
bougie. And the bathroom had like a rainforest shower and like a double thing.
Nice.
And
Wow.
yeah, it was legit. It was,
Yeah.
I was like, I could probably have another baby here.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I could do
I
this
thought it
one.
for like
It
about
makes a
5 minutes.
difference.
Right. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
you
I
remembered
thought
all
about it.
the other stuff and
Well, I
you're
thought
like,
about it for 5 minutes, and I think I sneezed and was like, never mind.
Yeah. And that was my biggest fear. That was like the older I get, like with them, well, we have to have these concerns. That was my biggest fear, was having a C-section, because I mean, I've heard your guys' stories before, and I know in general, like the pain is ridiculous.
yeah.
So
Yeah. It's not fun for a long time. And in general, you don't have to have had a C-section to have the abdominal problems. A lot of
yeah.
ladies don't, but that it certainly guarantees that you're going to have some type of it that is not really truly repairable. Like there's a lot of things you can
Yeah.
do, but it's not the same kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it
But
also limits how many kids you can have.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there we go. There's stories of how we became parents. Thank you for listening today as we kicked off a new parenting segment. We'd love for you to join in the conversation and share your stories with us on Instagram and Facebook. So check us out at the Virtual Compound Podcast on both. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode, and be sure to share with everybody else. And as always, thank you for listening to the Virtual Compound Podcast. Bye.
Bye.